I think
sci-fi.
Ooh, yeah.
I think it was purely like a marketing thing why I say this is I think like, oh, the nerds and the like young kids and everything, that's for them. This is a like fantasy section. This is not for us sophisticated like dramas or biographies.
We live in the real world.
Yeah,
that kind of stuff.
Yeah, I totally believe that was it. So let's shove it in that section.
That's why I'm saying it's a pre-trans fallacy. Is like, past and future are both not now.
Yeah.
Let's put all that in one section.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Which is dumb.
Agreed.
It is.
Yep. Cardiovascularly.
I mean, I guess you can make it. Yeah.
Yeah, I used it as an adverb.
Yeah, you can.
It's loud.
It's loud. Well, I mean, that's the beauty of the English language. You basically can do whatever the heck you want as long as you follow the rules.
I mean, I'm as good as Shakespeare, right?
Yeah. Speaking of Shakespeare, if you haven't seen Hamlet yet, I think we talked about it before.
Yeah.
Watch it. It's good. Yeah.
That'll factor into our episode whenever we do one on recommendations.
Right,
It's like, how do I file this recommendation? Do I circular file it? Is it top of my list? Is it somewhere in between?
Do a decimal system.
That's actually a good point of maybe one reason why when people suggest things to me, why my brain will sometimes just go, no, is because I don't have a way of archiving all of these recommendations.
I thought I went back to the Resistance episode where you hear a quest and you just like, fuck you.
Quack you too.
Both,
Yeah.
But now that I'm thinking, like, it could be multi-layered. It's not just me.
Well, again, like, I know that you can sometimes know what people like, what they kind of are tuned to. And if you suggest something, then you can connect on a kind of level, because if you both understand something at some kind of level, you understand each other better. But I think people are just like, this is really great. It's like, yeah, it's great to you. Like, you
don't really like it because I really like it and you really like me, right?
Yeah. So
it's
please like it.
If only it were that simple.
Yeah.
Which in a funny way, I know is not the exact topic that we're talking about today, but that I think does tie into this episode today.
Oh. So?
Whether or not you realize it, I don't know if I want to introduce it yet. Welcome, everybody. We are Bards and Balladeers. This is a podcast about story and narrative in all of its forms. I'm Kate.
I'm Oscar.
I'm Rio.
Welcome. So you're watching us here on YouTube, probably.
Or Spotify. Both get video now, which is cool.
See, I did not know that. I don't have Spotify.
Me either. We used to. Now it's gone.
Yeah.
All those subscription services,
Ugh.
Yeah, we love them.
Yes, YouTube.
Other places you can find us are on iTunes, iHeartRadio, Amazon Music, and we already said YouTube and Spotify too. But other areas that you can talk to us is our Discord. We post antics. We continue conversations there. If you don't have a Discord, it's a great reason to get one and join us. You can honestly just post whenever you want in there. It's like a
forum.
It's like a forum. Mm-hmm. That's a good way of explaining it.
It's like Trajan's Forum.
Yeah.
What?
Roman reference.
Dang it.
And we're the only moderators there, so you can basically do anything until you make us mad, and then we'll kick you out.
That's true.
Yeah.
That's true. So don't do that. Yeah. But then in general, links are in our description down below. Please like and subscribe, to us. It really makes the algorithm super happy and helps promote us. Any other special events coming up? I think
still book fair for grown-ups is coming up.
Yep.
This episode should be airing right around the 22nd of June, I think.
We should really write down when these are airing so we know exactly.
Mentally figured out, it's my birthday coming up,
That's all that matters.
Yeah.
That's an important event that's coming up. Your birthday.
Happy birthday.
Yeah, it's a big birthday too.
Yeah.
You can guess which one.
30.
Yes. Well done. Wow, how did you know?
I'm very good with numbers and time. It's been 4 minutes, 30 seconds at least.
Good to know. But yes, I do think that like what you were saying about characters and I was trying to tie it into this. Myths. Today's episode is about myths. Yes. I don't know if myths and stories, myths, how we use them in stories, actual myths.
Yeah, myths as stories. Yeah,
sure.
All the options.
All things mythological.
Yeah.
And
there's a lot to pull from, for sure.
Yes.
Yeah.
Through the pantheons of gods, from Greek to Roman to Incan to Egyptian to Norse, there's just a lot of, those seem to be like the big ones that people kind of latch on to. I mean, there's a deep lore for a lot of that stuff.
I mean, really, there's a lot with any culture. It's just which cultures are most visible to the most number of people.
That's fair.
I mean, there's a ton of African mythology.
It's true.
Legends.
Same with Far East.
Yeah.
But
also.
yeah, like in the US, we don't know a lot about them.
Right,
I wonder if
right.
that has to do with because a lot of those are recorded. Like a lot of like stories in a lot of cultures, especially like native cultures, they're just passed down by music, by just a word of mouth. There's no like
Oratorium.
written like thing.
Yeah,
for
and the
them.
Incas didn't really have a widely accessible written language. Now they're only just now discovering the quipus, like the knot tying that were for language, not numbers. They already knew about the
Oh.
numerical ones, but
Yeah.
they're only discovering the linguistic ones now.
See, we just learned about the knots for the numbers for keeping like record keeping for like I sold this many ox to you and
When did you learn about that?
Just like 2 days ago, like 2 or 3 days ago.
They're in
During
my
the-
second book.
Oh, are they?
During that,
There's a
series that we're
whole
watching. Yes.
thing.
Yes.
So I'm super excited to get to that part too. But it's a good point too, because also the Quipus, without the context of the situation that they happened in, it's really hard to decipher what exactly they were symbolizing.
They're beautiful.
Personifying.
Yeah.
It's true. So yeah, just a lot of different ways that one, I think that people are just in general fascinated by myths too.
Mhm.
Like I think it's fun to see what kind of myths people latch on to, because some people like, I mean, growing up, like you might have like loved like Greco-Roman, like, you know, myths and whatnot.
Right.
You were a Zeus kid. That's, you know,
A Zeus kid.
weird.
You might have been a Zeus kid.
I mean, right,
Yeah.
right.
Yeah, the Roman versions were like the Timu, you know. It's like the, you know, store brand
Right,
Greek ones, but
And
Malk.
Milk.
That was a Simpsons reference. It's like, why am I bones hurt? I drink a lot of milk.
now with more vitamin K.
Yeah.
But I guess I'm not trying to interrupt anyone, but like
Please do.
before we get into the like differences between like mythology and legend and how it's different from other stories, I do like you were saying like what he said tied in. I don't want you to lose that thread unless you
did.
already have.
Nope,
All right.
already got it.
All right.
Something
On to the next
about
thing.
like what people choose to be fascinated by. Maybe I'll rewatch this and maybe I'll remember. And maybe I'll post to the Discord.
That's it.
And
That's where you
maybe
get the
all of
extra.
that is
Yeah.
a myth.
Yes,
totally
the
gonna
cake,
do
the
that.
myth, the legend. But to maybe this is where you're going to, but to define myths maybe more in some way, shape, or form if we can.
Yeah, because I mean, you know, you think, well, any kind of fiction, can't anything like that be a myth? Like, what does it need to be a myth? And I don't think there's a rigid correct answer,
Sure.
but I feel like myths are usually they're usually used in terms of creationism, but not necessarily. It
Sure.
often seems more like a story told in metaphor. Like it doesn't have to be referencing any real people, any real settings. And I mean, I know again that's just fiction, but like one thing they all seem to have in common is like externalizing emotion. Like this character represents this emotion, that represents that emotion. This represents this force, you know, like volcanism, you know, volcano, you've got a god for that, Vulcan, or Hephaestus in the Greek mythology.
Sure.
Pele and Hawaiian.
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah.
Or a really good Brazilian soccer player.
Yeah, too.
Yep.
That's what I was going to say. Also
But-
messy, but no.
No, he's not that good.
Chilean.
Dang.
No,
Paraguay?
he's plenty good when all of the circumstances allow him to be.
Isn't that
And
just
when he-
life in general?
No,
Like-
I've seen him play in the World Cups, and he's such a big freaking baby.
well, they all are. I'm sorry. Like, that's why I don't watch soccer.
I don't know, like there's a lot of them are good, but he's a big freaking baby.
Yeah. But one of the things I wanted to add to touch on this, I know soccer back to myth, is that I almost think that myth is really one of those things that is cultural, and a lot of people talked about all this stuff, and as we learn more about the world and why there's not like a water god or like a thunder god or whatever, because we learned about science stuff with them.
Right.
But it was purposeful. All these myths were purposeful for whatever they need to. When you had like, don't anger the thunder god, or don't do bad things, or the thunder god's going to strike you down,
Right.
kind of thing, you know, it became purposeful. And now we use myths and like legend stuff for entertainment, because we found those things. Now it's like, those stories are intriguing to us. Those stories are kind of just like, we know they're not real, but we want to imagine they're kind of real. We want to know that kind of fun part of that, you know?
Yeah, it's like, you know, there was a way for ancients to make sense of things.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't even know how much they believed it. So obviously to some degree, various people did to some degree. There's there's a sucker born every minute.
I mean,
no, but it's one of the things with tribalism, with the cognitive development of that, a lot of the time is like, it's called atomism, where it's like, there's a name for every bend in the river, but no name for the river.
Oh,
so it's like, there might be something as specific as rain gods, or even, like god of crop rotation or whatever. It could be really, really specific.
Yes.
And it's like, it could be a force, a phenomenon, a feeling, a being, but it's just mythologized into this external thing that has to be respected.
Yeah.
Like, respect this thing that you have no control over.
Yes.
Legends, I think, are different in this, and there's a lot of overlap, but legends are often like about people and like, exaggerated adventures of people, like Hercules, legendary journeys. Hercules, mythological figure, but mythological man. So then the legends about him would be the things that he did, the things he encountered, etc.
Yeah. King Arthur would be another, like,
King Arthur. Well, there's evidence that was a real person, but but all the stuff that's around that,
probably,
and
what, Moist and Bink throwing scimitars at me. Like,
so I do like what you're saying, though, that myths and legends are very tightly knit. Like, they're very closely involved. That's a correct phrasing.
Yeah, I was trying to find another way to say it, but they're very tied together.
Yeah.
And so no wonder they're hard to really define and keep separate from one another, because you kind of need one to have the other in a way.
Or one fits in the other.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's a weird thing, but either way, it's just things that we have, were used to explain things that like you said, the unexplainable, or the things that just kind of, I don't want to say put people in their place, but sometimes, people use those myths and legends, like, watch out, or Krampus is going to come and get you during Christmas if you're not a good kid. It's just these things that kind of people put, like the stories of the Brothers Grimm, those are all, I won't say myths, but they're fables, like, and it almost is an extension of the myth, right?
Yeah. Fable tends to have like a moral point at the end.
Yeah.
But the language it uses is kind of that mythological, legendary language.
Sure. Yeah.
And that's one thing I think that is kind of characteristic, at least to a modern audience, about myths, is the style of language used.
Sure.
Now, maybe that was just how people wrote or talked back in the day. But now, if we write things that are deliberately written to be myths, we tend to copy that style.
That very honorific, almost kind of like style of like very formal, almost, I would say.
Just like, the sun god, the moon goddess, whatever. And like, the world of, the realm of snakes or something like that.
Sure. Yeah.
It's all like in a creative way to try to make an unfamiliar thing familiar.
Trying to relate to it.
Yeah.
Make it relatable.
Personify it, make it more digestible and relatable.
Yeah.
And even though we were talking about portals last week, it feels kind of similar in a way of just like, because when we were talking about portals, we were talking about going from, the known to the unknown.
Right.
Whereas here
this feels more like about bridges than portals.
Yeah.
Building a bridge from your own frame of reference to the frames of reference within that story.
Yes.
What's the bridge that gets you, like, that opens your mind to understand that world of things?
Sure.
And it's often a series of metaphors and mythological, be like not real beings and all of that helps you just understand it.
Yeah.
And science is a bridge from the scientific mind to like natural phenomenon. So that's a bridge that has replaced the utility of a lot of mythology for modern people.
Oh, interesting.
It's a provable mythology, almost like
tested
mythology. Yeah.
It's falsifiable. A lot of things about mythology, for those who don't know what falsifiable means, is it's a scientific principle that you, like a hypothesis or a theory, you can't prove a theory or a hypothesis unless it's falsifiable, which means that there are answers you can get that you can say that's wrong.
Yeah.
So you have to be able to get at what the data is, what the thing is. Like, if you say, is there God or not? You have to have a way to get at an answer.
Right.
If you can't just say yes or no, and it's, well, who knows? Well, then it's not falsifiable, which means it's not scientific.
Right.
It can be metaphysics, it can be philosophy, myth, but it's not science. So mythology tends to be not falsifiable.
Right. Which it's funny you say that, because one of the questions that we did want to ask ourselves while going through this is, why do we use myths like in our stories? Like, what is the purpose? What can be the purpose of them? And one of the things that I had acknowledged is that they show that if we use myth and a character either believes or doesn't believe in a myth, it shows a certain level of faith or trust that the character is actually capable of having or not capable of having. Maybe it's a distinct choice to believe it, to have that suspended belief and have the faith. Some others might think that that could be gullible, and some characters might be opposed to that and be opposed to learning from myths and will only learn from their own tested, theories and whatnot. So I do think that myths really could have a fantastic place in our stories, but I do think it's more of like an advanced world building tool.
Yeah.
The top level almost. Yeah.
It can be a lot of work. I mean, as someone who I've written a couple scenes with like myths in them. One was like there's pages of a myth, an entire myth I'm very proud of, but it's not easy to just write that way unless that's what you're trying to write and you can just focus on it. But if you're just incorporating it into world building, it's definitely, it definitely requires a lot of focus because it has to be internally consistent. It tends to be culture bound. Like one use for myths is to help define or reinforce a cultural identity. And that's not easy when you're outside of that culture. It's a lot easier when you're within it.
Yeah.
Like, sure.
Like how would we define American culture? It's going to be easier for us than like, ancient Congolese,
Sure.
And I feel like it's used as world building, but also to establish mentality and time period. Like even in fantasy, there'll be these cultures that are talking about their ancient myths. So you're establishing a passage of time between when the myth is supposed to be about and the current day of that fantasy culture or something. Like what are some old centaur myths or something?
Sure.
Like these modern day centaurs versus the ancient centaurs. Like you're establishing not just culture, but the basis for it, passage of time, all that kind of stuff.
And how they came to be or like any of that stuff. Yeah.
And then some people in that modern time might believe those myths. Maybe nobody does. Maybe everybody does.
Right.
That also shows you where the culture is at developmentally from the time that those myths were originated to now.
Yeah. I like that you mentioned that sort of like, what is the purpose of it right now? Like you said, will determine how much that culture has evolved, I guess, or developed.
Yeah.
I think that's the word.
Evolved, progressed in different ways. It could be technological, but in terms of beliefs, a lot of the time is what that, how much closer to science, not that science is the end all be all, but it's something that we can all currently relate to in some way or another.
Sure. Where we are at, and I think the reason why we see a lot of stories about like those like Norse, Greek, Egyptian, whatever, it's a cool way for an easier way to get into like those myths without having to like do all that hard lifting for it, and there's nothing wrong with it. Like, there's a wonderful like deep lore for all that stuff. But if you just want to play, it's like playing in someone else's world, right? We talked about like, writing in someone else's world. And, I think that it's such a rich place that why not just use that? There's nothing wrong with that, but when we, like, to your point, if you choose to write these in your story, you got to think of how deep and penetrating these myths and lore is and what you want to use them for. Because I wanted to have this reverence for like the elements and nature and gods and everything, but not have it so that they're so like deep into it where they have to like pray to them or anything like that. They just like, they know it's there, they respect it, but they just kind of accept it as a part of nature. Like God.
Never told?
Mm-hmm.
Oh,
yeah,
okay.
sorry.
It's more like the Tao teaching or whatever. I helped edit that. That's what you're talking about.
A little bit that's actually that the Nouveau Partagé is what it's called, is what he's referencing, and I'll be releasing sometime in the future. The supplemental like book, and it's almost like a teaching on kind of philosophy, like Sun Tzu's Art of War, kind of like.
It's like a world building element. Like if you are a writer of stories and you produced like a Bible that all the characters in there reference, it's like that.
Yeah. Thank you. Yeah, definitely like that. And they do. And I even have it in the comic book. They talk about it. And in my next book, they're going to be talking about it. And I don't know what possessed me to actually write it, but I'm just like, well, if they're talking about it, maybe I should have some passages. And I started writing some passages like, oh, I can fill this out more. Like, and then I went and just filled up the whole thing. And it's only like 60 pages, but it's all got like just little tidbits like you'd find like in the Bible and stuff like that. Yeah. But that builds the lore. But I had to be dedicated to that and understand why I want that to be a thing.
Right. Well, and one thing that was difficult editing, I don't want to get your comments, but one of the things that was difficult editing that was I wanted to make sure that it was somewhat internally consistent, but not to the point where it is unassailable. Because if you're writing that sort of document, it's coming from that standpoint where it should be able to be questioned. There should be some points on which it's a little bit vague, but where you're not actively saying the opposite in one part of it that you were saying in the previous part of it or something. So it's a challenge to help edit that. Yeah. Because like you said, like mythological speech, mythological language is difficult because you need that cultural consistency. It doesn't have to be scientifically internally consistent. It has to be culturally internally consistent.
Yeah, absolutely.
And the only thing I was going to add to that is that back to my comment of these myths can show a character's like certain level of faith. And, Otavir's like constant like dedication to this, source is a fantastic thing. Like to me, it's just very interesting. It tells me a lot about, I say Otavir, that's a character that
the next character,
the next book. But it again, without knowing a lot about him, I feel like I understand him to a certain degree. And it's a thing that I like in a character too. Like devotion is a thing that I just find interesting.
Right.
So that's all I was going to add. But I hadn't thought about that essentially being a mythos type thing, like or a mythos supporting concept, because it's very recent in a way, right?
Yeah.
Like, I mean, maybe I'm getting that wrong. Maybe I'm thinking, like how old, like would that book be?
Probably like 200 years old, maybe. Oh, okay. Yeah. So a good amount.
It is. Yeah. It's older than I thought, actually.
Yeah. And it's a little spoilers here, but it's been added to over the years, and it's actually been written by a multitude of people.
That was also part of what I factored in editing it.
Yeah.
Nice.
That I came across, and I wanted to make sure that was retained. Yeah. Which means it can't be too internally consistent either.
Sure, right. But I also do think, and then this comes to like even like the Bible and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Rewritten Bible interpretations, like would they have publish this book and be like, no, I think it'd be better if it sounded like this or whatever, and like seeing what the church would do with that. And there's a church in my stories.
Different
some of
people
that.
doing different interpretations.
Yeah.
Well, and like some sections of it are very different from other sections. Like Leviticus is its own beast.
Yeah. Right. Yeah.
So yeah, having it like look that way just gives it more texture.
Yeah.
But that makes me think too, like you said, it's like 200 years old.
Yeah.
And some mythology, like, obviously is way older than that. And this will eventually be way older, but but one of the uses, not to skip ahead too much, but one of the uses for mythology and stories too, is it makes for good propaganda.
It's true.
Because you could also use that document as propaganda. Like this supports my cultural interpretation. If I interpret it this way, I can get people to buy into that.
Yeah.
And that's, like I said, it's mythology tends to be culturally like establish or support a cultural identity.
Right.
People can use that to their own negative purposes.
Very persuasive or manipulative, or however you want to phrase it.
Like if you can argue that your mythology or your Bible or whatever is on your side, you can convince people to do an awful lot of stuff.
It's true. It's true.
And I have a character, because I have another character who has like an old version of it that was like passed down by his father, and he just is like, this is rubbish. Like, I don't know why anybody would follow this. Like, the Nouveau Protégé, and in the new one, there's a general who has a book version of that is passed down to his father, just writing in it. And he's just like, well, this is dumb. Like, this is not even right. This doesn't make sense. Like, and everything. And he discredits it all because he's
the
more
ancient one, the like one passed down.
Yeah. Because he's more of a person of science, and he sees control through the elements and the magic system in there. So,
well, and as I went through it, I'm like, I mean, anyone with a scientific mind could pick the whole thing apart this way.
Yeah.
Right.
But that's, you already knew that. And I didn't ask you if you already knew that. I was like, you already know that.
Yeah.
And like, I'm glad to have that verified, but it's like, like that totally fits.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's fun to have that sort of thing as part of your world building.
Yeah.
And whether you're writing a myth or a whole book of myths or a philosophy, even,
Sure.
It's a cultural artifact.
Yeah.
And so why we use it in stories? Well, the more cultural artifacts you have, the more relatable that culture becomes to you. It's sort of like having the myth is that bridge from you to the story that you've written.
Sure. Yeah.
Okay. Well, now you've got all these things that make them relatable.
Yeah. And even, so like my character and everything, it's the mythos can drive a lot of characters to do things, like especially if they feel like they've been wronged by a certain mythos or like a legend. Where one of the ideas I think of was it Thor: Love and Thunder, where there's a one guy who was totally dedicated to the gods and everything. Is like, oh, please do this for me. He's like, why would I? I'm a god. I don't even care about you. But it's like, but I've been dedicated to you my entire life. Why aren't you not like giving me, some kind of reward for that? And just like, because I don't really care about you. I just want what I can get from you. And then that becomes the turning point for the character where he's like, well, now I just want you all to die. Like, so
Right.
It can be that driving force, not only to do good, but also, and not to do bad in the name of good, but also just to be bad against the whole mythos, because like, I don't conform to this idea anymore. Like,
Yeah.
yeah. So
Like I imagine, in ancient Egypt, that probably happened. If you like, the Pharaoh is a god, that's part of the propaganda we talked about.
yeah.
And maybe I'm sure a bunch of them actually believed stuff like that, but a lot of them probably didn't.
Yeah.
But hey, it really helped them get what they wanted. And other people interacted with that in a transactional way. What can I get from this god, or what can I get from this person?
Yeah.
I don't have to believe it. I just have to use it as a way to get through life in this setting.
Yeah. Hey guys, thanks for watching. And if you can do us a favor, please like, comment, subscribe, and share this video, and click that notification bell to stay up to date. And now back to the show.
I like what you guys are saying though about this, because I was, as we're talking, I'm trying to think, well, how do I use it in my stories? And it's funny, a character that I've brought multiple times before, his name is Veriseth, but he's from a very tribal region of an elf planet. And they're not as advanced. They don't want to be. They're very nomadic. They like their life the way that it is, but they do use like constellation stories. And so the reason why I found it interesting that his character is one that comes from a tribe like that is this almost like not retaliation, the response, the rebellion response,
Or rejection of it. Yeah.
The backlash.
Yeah, because he's a character that like he would be very apathetic to something like that, and he would do it very transactionally. And he mentions these ancients of what they call their constellations in a way that like how annoying, that's what it would feel. That's what they would think. But I think that's baloney. But he still acknowledges them. It's still like a very integral part of his culture that he grew up in.
Mhm.
And so I think that apathetic response is actually kind of fun now that I talk about it, because he would be very like rebellious towards
Yeah.
that.
Yeah, I mean, the history of how people have reacted to mythology also cements that as mythology.
That's
Like,
true.
Sure, yeah.
It's
Because
true.
like we wouldn't even think of it as mythology if nobody rejected it.
Mhm.
Yeah.
We'd think of it as real. So like having
Mhm.
characters that reject it kind of increases its weight as mythology.
Yeah. No,
Right.
very well said.
And
Yeah.
to that point too, like is a myth only viable or sustaining if we keep talking about it? Like, or because if I just think of something, is that a myth? Even if it's like something I wrote down in it and like 100 years later, somebody picks it up or something like that. Is that a myth? Like what is the defining like attribute?
I think it's almost like if you're a god when there are no followers, are you still a god?
Right.
Like,
Yeah.
Mhm.
if there's no one buying into this myth, is it still a myth?
Right.
Is it just a story then? And I almost feel like a myth is like a story that a bunch of people believe or
Yeah.
believed at some point.
Mhm.
Or just keep talking about.
Right. It's like, hey, once a New York Times bestseller, always a New York Times bestseller.
Sure.
It's
Until-
on the list of myths now. Enough people believed it at that time that it permanent for the rest of it's, as long as people are mentioning it, it gets myth status,
So
Sure.
talking about video games real quick, I used to play Final Fantasy 14, and it was a online massive multiplayer RPG. And some of their beasts and like their bigger like boss characters came to fruition when they got a large source of like crystals into one place. And then enough people believed in that like just the element itself or just the power that's behind it, and it would manifest into an actual physical being in that way. So it's kind of, that's direct belief creating direct, like, response. And that was kind of cool. And I like that,
Yeah. Like actually the term psychosomatic for like illnesses you might have, a lot of the time, apparently it's supposed to actually be psychogenetic if it created the problem, but it's some more like, if you like, let's say you got like telepathic beings, like you have a psychogenetic external phenomenon.
Sure.
It's like by y'all believing this, you're making it real.
Yeah. Wow. Again, back to the orcs.
Yep. The orcs from
40K. Yeah.
Which is so much fun. All of these different ways of using myths. Like it's like we said earlier, it's a world building tactic, which you think I wouldn't like it, but I'm actually
sure. But they're people almost.
Yeah, it's
right?
true.
Like,
it's true.
The gods are people,
Right. And how it intersects, like in the story, like you always say, Oscar, like how can this thing be used? Can it be used well? And I think we've gone over a lot of actually examples of it being used well. I really can't think of an example of it being used poorly.
I can.
Oh, do tell.
You're so ready for that.
Yeah.
Well, I was going to ask this question too. Is
okay.
Ways that we've seen it used in sci-fi, and the things that immediately come to mind are prophecies and all these trappings of fantasy.
Yeah.
Sure.
And it's like in sci-fi where it's like, evolutionarily, like developmentally, how would these things even manifest? Like think Dune, the Kwisatz Haderach and the Lisan al-Gaib or whatever. All these prophecies, and you can see like there's this whole order kind of manipulating that, the Bene Gesserit order.
Right.
So they're already using it as propaganda.
Yeah.
Whether it's not even necessarily made clear. I don't remember. It's been 30 years since I read the first book.
Dang.
So I don't remember if it's made clear that whether or not they're the source of it or they're just exploiting it.
Sure. I'll call my brother. He'll know.
He would, honestly. Phone a friend.
Yeah. Eventually I'll read the books again, or the first one and the next two, but
sure.
But yeah, it's that sort of thing, or the, Neo, like the prophecy of the chosen one.
Yeah.
He's going to die, would be reborn, and then he'll be the one. I'm like, okay, I find those not great uses because I feel like they're outside of a genre where that's a good device.
I want to counter that though, because in the Matrix, they said they had to do it to, like, they plotted exactly how people react because they, being the machines, they knew exactly, or at least they had a good idea of how they would have reacted to these things. That's why they had to have Zion. That's why they had to give somebody a place to live, and the free will and all this idea of free will, right? That's
why the Oracle was another AI.
Yeah. But she worked with the architect to try to make this happen. And even says to her, it's like, you played a dangerous game and everything. You could have destroyed like the Matrix and everything, and it could all fall apart. But they even say like that Neo may not have been the one. It might have actually been Agent Smith. Mm-hmm. Like there's this whole theory and stuff like that too.
Of course, that's in movies 2 and 3, which didn't really exist. So no, I'm just kidding. No,
I get it.
I don't get to pick which ones are canon.
Yeah.
Right.
But yeah, I feel like a lot of the time we run into myth in sci-fi.
Sure.
And I feel like that's just because we don't really, a lot of people who want to write sci-fi don't really want to write sci-fi. They want to write fantasy and space.
Oh, yeah. Which science fantasy is, it's always been a genre, but I think could be a stronger genre. If
I'm fine if it's science fantasy and you make it clear that's science fantasy, go for it.
That's what I'm saying. Like if they make it specifically clear and own up to it, like it's science fantasy. There's nothing wrong with that. Star Wars is science fantasy. There's so much science fantasy out there.
Well, and Shadow World, like that game, like eventually I'll write those. I've decided now, but
you heard it
you've
first.
Got this like ancient civilization, like galactic spanning. That's the sci-fi element. Dead and gone, and old, and you've got like a dark age, and then all these other races coming up, and they're in more of fantasy space. Yeah, that's a good way to have science fantasy, where it's science fantasy because the fantasy is discovering the science fiction part. It's not because they're like necessarily melded together. It's because of the passage of time and lost knowledge and all of it. It's like burning of Alexandria times a million.
Sure,
it's true. Kind of like how Horizon Zero Dawn, it's a video game where that's almost fantasy in a way too. It's a post-apocalyptic, world, but they're trying to utilize or refurbish the old technology, but they can't. And then you're discovering some of it too. So I like that idea of, science fantasy, like it's rediscovering that sci-fi element of however it existed before. That's I don't know, just a clever use of it.
Or real quick, like how, like to your Horizon Zero Dawn example, is that the technology exists to remake the world. The people who were born into it don't know the technology because they were supposed to be taught like everything, like mathematics, chemistry, science, everything. But that program got destroyed. So when they came back into the world, they didn't know anything. So they're just all of a sudden robotic machines like out there, and they're like, well, this must be the world. And no one questions it until the science disproves the myth, and that's where I think that cool like mesh of between sci-fi and like fantasy can be really cool. Like,
Yeah.
Yeah, it's with the prophecies and such, like, and you see that as propaganda too. Like I mentioned with Dune, but also just like in real life, you'll see it like, Kim Jong-un has a bunch of like crap that he propagates, and then this stuff,
unicorns.
It starts with basic lies, and they become more and more grandiose, like Trump's handicap at golf. It's like that's been actually dissected like complete and utter nonsense. It's Biden, same with his handicap, honestly.
Sure, yeah.
When I'm not trying to get into politics, but just like lies, and then more like bigger and bigger lies, like first person to do this, or like even lying about your weight and having a divine, like most physically fit or whatever. Like I think that's actually a thing that a lot of dictators lie about.
Why
they won this award for this thing, and they didn't do any of that.
It's the illusion of power.
Yeah, that is true. Like,
but to a godlike level, where it's like not even possible, and you kind of see how you get pharaohs.
Yeah,
and you get like all of these like dynastic figures. So
no, it's true. That's another way of using it, of using mythos and propaganda very much can be used. I would even say probably in fantasy and sci-fi too, and the things that we write, not just in real life too. It's a bit more disappointing when we see it in real life, but at least in stories we can sort of, it perpetuates the like illusion or whatever we're trying to write and add to the world. And I think it's just a fun element that I don't think a lot of people might necessarily think of when they're reading books or when they're reading, new franchises or anything. I'm stuck on the fact that like, you're absolutely right about the prophecy element in these in these fantasy like tropes being used in sci-fi, and how like, I think we've just seen so many examples of it now, and that I can see why people would just be kind of done with it.
Sure. It's just oversaturation, because one person does it well and everybody's like, oh, that's cool too. And then everyone does it and just like, okay.
When it's like, you see it, I think a lot because people, they feel really connected to their fantasy. That's why sci-fi and fantasy is a category at a bookstore.
Sure.
Why are they together?
Right.
They should not.
I think it's partially because of this phenomenon.
Sure.
Is that we're really tied to our fantasy roots, and they're both about not being in the here and now, which I get,
Haven't we said that fantasy is like almost like past, and then sci-fi is just always kind of imagining?
That's how I believe.
Past, future in one section. Which, I can see that, but at the same time, it's like maybe because they're lumped together, we lump them together in other ways. Like which came first? Like, did we lump them together because of that, or did the lumping together create this like phenomenon of like fantasy tropes in?
I think
sci-fi.
Ooh,
I think it was purely like a marketing thing why I say this is I think like, the nerds and the like young kids and everything, that's for them. This is the like fantasy section. This is not for us sophisticated like dramas or biographies.
We live in the real world.
Yeah.
That kind of stuff.
Yeah. I totally believe that was it. So let's shove it in that section.
That's why I'm saying it's a pre-trans fallacy, is like, past and future are both not now.
Yeah.
Let's put all that in one section.
Yeah.
Which is dumb.
Agreed.
It is.
Yep.
Yeah.
It is. And it's funny how all of this came about by just talking about myths and whatnot.
Yeah.
Because I think it's when you're talking about the Bene Gesserit and the Dune stories, just their ability to say, or maybe to not distinguish between whether or not it's something that already existed in the past and they're just perpetuating it, or it's something new that they created with the illusion that it is the thing from the past to give it more like credibility.
Right.
Like what a strong and like powerful like foundation sort of for a story. Obviously Dune is a very massive,
Right.
I think, story in itself, and the world building is insanely just like developed, at least from an outside perspective. I've never read
Well,
it.
especially the politics of it in the
Yes.
books,
And I think that I'm inspired by it, I guess, as a writer,
Mhm.
because, to have that strong of a foundation for, is that sort of like where the magic system in that world kind of lies, other than maybe spice? I don't know. But just how much it can add to a story without really adding too much. Like we don't like it's a mysterious thing, right? The Bene Gesserit
Mhm.
and Dune. I should look to you too.
Yeah, I think that it depends on how you do. If they have some kind of clairvoyance or actually like future seeing,
Yeah,
that
ESP.
ESP like that, and how that is defined and how it is developed. If there is some scientific backing by that, if you can. I kind of play around with it a little bit with my spirits in my story, but it's just like if you had like I can see tachyons, whatever travels back in time. Dark matter travels backwards, I think, in time. I can't remember, one of the two. And like if you can somehow tap into the energy and like know how it interacts with something in the future, like then maybe you could have some kind of future sight, and then it becomes technological. But it's then that comes to the idea of like fate, and like, can you change fate? Can you change that?
And even the word fate goes back to Greek mythology.
Sure.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, this
fates,
kind of more like, that's along the lines of what I was going to say too, is that like the presence of like the higher mind or ESPs, like psychic phenomenon. Again, that's also like not in the here and now.
Yeah.
So it's like you see that in pre-mental structures of just like mythologizing things, but also transmental structures where you're using parts of the brain, or, like arguably, or you're using parts of the brain or of the brain where like you don't normally use. And it's like all of that precognitive or, accessing information that's out there, like it's actually like real, but that you don't have direct access through your five senses, like a sixth sense access or something.
Yeah.
And so you could see how those would be conflated. They'd be put together like, and now you're getting mythology out of your ESP. And then it's like, there's two things that happen with this sort of confusion is you get reductionism, where you take all higher realities and assume that they're actually just like, primitive. Or you take primitive realities and assume that they're all higher, because both are like not like rational, mental, like present. And so you're lumping them together. You can reduce them or elevate them. And that's like the Freudian approach to like reduce them, or the Jungian approach to elevate them is usually how that goes. And I think that you get this confusion a lot in sci-fi and fantasy, partially because of the ESP and precog thing.
Yeah.
And so I think that's part of how they go together, but it's not usually done well because these dynamics aren't well understood.
Yes.
Sure. And you had to have that suspended, because when you go to sci-fi, you usually want to live in a world that has some kind of bearing or basis and makes sense. Like when you put something like ESP or clairvoyance or precog, you gotta be like, okay, I guess, like, it's just like, there's no basis behind that.
And you didn't usually think, I want to have to study this to write my sci-fi.
Yeah. Right. But another thing too, with like how, I wrote down how you should never meet your heroes, because there becomes a legend and faith in these legends and myths and everything. And once you discover it, it could totally change or destroy your perception of the world. And then you have to be you had to be okay with the lie, or you had to change your perception. Right.
Yeah.
And a lot of people like, and I say, don't meet your heroes, because then you meet your favorite actor, whatever, and they're a complete jerk. And then you're just like, now all their acting, it's like, it's bad. You have that mentality in your head.
Your reality.
Yeah.
You're projecting onto the person.
Yeah.
There's a way this happens in daily life, which is dating apps.
Just social media in general.
Yeah.
Yeah. If you don't meet someone in person and all your interaction is through these filters, or just seeing what they wrote or whatever, you get this idea about who they are.
Yeah.
And it can be positive or negative, but you're mythologizing them.
Sure.
And then when you meet them, and it shatters this reality you've built up. And what I always say to people about this in this kind of scenario is, it's like holding a belief that you can't prove or disprove for a long time is like holding a light bag of groceries for a really long time.
Sure, it gets heavy eventually.
It feels heavier and heavier and heavier. And then after a while, like then it's harder and harder after you've felt that weight for a long time to confront like, oh, there's really not much in here.
Yeah.
And so it's like, you've built up this person positively or negatively. And then you meet them, you're like, oh, there's really not that much in here.
Right.
It's true.
Yeah. And it's one thing.
You got to face that.
Yeah. And it's one thing with us and everything. And I can tell you this, and you can believe it or not, but we try to be authentic with what we do, way we talk, way we interact, what the ideas we do. We write down notes, but we try to make it so that we can talk about things and we'll jump back and forth. But it's just so I hope that if you ever meet any of us, we're pretty much the same. We're not going to be this face of things. So we never had to live up to the myth. And I never want to have to live up to this idea. So it's I'm unapproachable because I'm on a podcast or something like that,
But the difference though is that people are only seeing us through the podcast. So they can totally mythologize what we're like outside of that.
Sure.
True.
And even if this fits that, there are other things that that this could fit.
Yeah.
That would be authentic. And so people might they might even believe that and be but still have a totally different idea of who we are.
Yeah. And that's true.
So we always carry around a Bards and Balladeers mug.
Yeah.
Wherever we go.
And not a can
all the time.
Not a can of Celsius.
I never carry anything branded. But also
your sweatshirt.
Yeah. But that kind of gets back, we wrote down the famous Star Trek Next Gen episode.
Yeah.
Darmok and Gelada Tanagra, which maybe we should use as part of the title. I don't know. But we wrote down that episode, and one thing that strikes me about that episode, some of you don't know, but they encounter this culture that only speaks in kind of culturally bound myths and metaphors. So it's hard for anyone else to understand what they're talking about.
Right.
But they're trying to, that's their whole language. That's that episode in a nutshell.
Yeah. Watch. It's great though.
It is really good. Highly recommend it to anybody. But one other thing, when they're in that episode, Counselor Troy is talking to Picard about she just puts his mug of tea and just says Zizmarith. What did I just say? He's like, tea. And it's are you sure? It could have said hot, cold, liquid, you know, any of these things. You don't know what they're emphasizing.
Yeah.
And so that's how you can be authentic and people can still get a wrong idea of what it is.
Sure.
What it is you're talking about, who it is you are.
Yeah. But that's almost like a language barrier, but I get your point. Yeah. Right. Yeah.
It's all about what emphasis are you trying to put forth and what emphasis are other people picking up on?
Right.
And that's where you're part of the point of myths is to bridge that gap, make something relatable, accessible. Mm-hmm. But even then, it's not a perfect way of doing that. It's kind of a primitive way of doing it.
Kind of like we said earlier with the translating certain books, the Bible, your protege, it's that translation then is crucial. Because who are you delivering it to? Are you going to translate it in a different way for a certain group of people for them to understand? Or do you have to do it in a different way so that multiple groups will understand?
I mean, people, not to bring the Bible too much into it, but people interpret the Bible in so many different ways. And that's the truth with anything. You'd be like, well, what about this? It's it was a passage in a book somewhere. We're like, well, I think they meant that we should really be nice to everybody. And somebody else no, you shouldn't be nice to the people who are nice to you. People can interpret this in so many different ways. And it's such it's a humanistic thing,
There's a reason for that too, is that the stage of cognition that comes up with myths is called an ethnocentric stage.
Okay.
And the interpretations of everything at that stage are bound by the small community that you're around or that raised you.
Yeah.
And so if they raised you to interpret a thing this particular way, whether you read that or not, you're going to interpret it that way until you develop past that. Right. That's the key is you can develop past that or you can reject it. There's ways around it, but if you're fitting into that culture, that's going to be your belief too. It's an ethnicity is more of a shared identity and perspective more than it is following the philosophy. So there is a point of fail between your cultural identity and whatever philosophy you claim to follow. So there can be discrepancies between the two. That's how that comes about.
Right.
And again, very advanced world building when it comes to story writing.
Yeah, you don't actually have to understand anything I just said to effectively write a myth.
It's true.
In your stories,
No.
trust me.
A myth can be as simple as like the guy who walked straight across 6 lanes of traffic and didn't get hit without looking.
Right?
You
Yeah,
know,
yeah.
that's a myth, you know?
Yeah, like
the
that-
faith of a
that-
blind man.
Yeah, the
Oh, nice.
like favored by the gods, like
Sure.
luck, like whatever,
Yeah.
fate.
Right.
Yeah. And if you do it, like, I'm not telling you how to write your books, but if you do it, just make sure that it's like purposeful and that you have intent for it, because you don't need to bloat your book and you don't need to put something in there that's just flavor text almost like, you know, I feel like when you use it really well, it can be so enlightening and purposeful for the world at large. You know, that's why I like to use it, I guess. Yeah.
Yeah, it is best when it's put in that kind of context and not just a one-off reference.
Sure.
Like there's a Police song called Wrapped Around Your Finger where there's a couple references in there. It's like, okay, what are you talking about?
Sure.
Come on. Like it's like the Scylla and Charybdis. I'm like, I don't know what are you trying to convey, guys?
I just
What
like
does
rocks.
this mean?
Yeah.
Like the pivotal Police song Rocks. Yeah.
That's where it ends. Yeah.
I love it. We heard that the other day. We were just dying. I'm just like, this is so stupid.
Couldn't stop laughing.
Yeah.
Like,
It's one of those things too, like before we had all this technology where we could record everything, like a lot of people wouldn't believe you, but like I was there. I saw this happen and everything, you know, and that those like even interpersonal became myths, you know. It's just like, do you remember that one time like me and you, we like jumped across a river and then this bear chased us and everything? It was like, that didn't happen. No one
Right.
believed you.
Yeah.
But now we have like film and like,
right. It couldn't be disproven before.
Yeah.
Like we talked about in the beginning of the episode. But now, yeah, phones, like there's more firsthand evidence all
Yeah.
around. And it's also preventing some people from actually living their lives.
Yeah.
You know, which
Yeah.
Don't end
that's
on a
shame.
sad note.
Yeah, sorry guys. I guess that was my final thought.
Yeah, I do have one little like opposite day kind of thing to say about it too.
Sure.
Like the show Band of Brothers.
Sure.
Yeah.
There's like 1 or 2 scenes in there that they toned down because they thought people wouldn't believe that they really happened.
Oh.
So like what's his name? Spears, like Lieutenant Spears running all the way through the enemy to get to I Company and then running all the way back. The distance was actually much longer than portrayed in the show.
Wow.
Oh.
But they didn't think people would believe that. So they made it shorter. So
Yeah.
it's like, no, he's more legendary than
Sure.
than the
they
legend
showed.
they're building with the
Yeah.
show.
Crazy.
So like, yeah, just there's all kinds of ways to use myth and legend
Yeah.
in stories. And again, maybe one of these times we'll talk more specifically about legends.
Yeah, maybe.
yes.
And we'll talk about Zeus making love to so many different things. And
It's his favorite pastime. But thanks for joining us, everybody. You know us. We are Bards and Balladeers. I'm Kate.
we are Kate. We are 3-7, 3 or 4.
I'm Oscar.
I'm Rio. We'll see you guys later.
Bye.
Bye.